Hello, beautiful listeners. It's your host, Tembi Locke. Welcome to Lifted, a podcast that pulls back the curtain on creativity, resilience, and the extraordinary moments when everything changes. To kick off season 2 of Lifted, I sat down with the McBride sisters. Now, it's no secret that I love stories of sisterhood. And the story of Robin McBride and Andréa McBride is remarkable, even before you learn that together they created the largest Black and women-owned wine company in the United States. These sisters grew up 7,000 miles apart in California and in New Zealand, unaware of the other's existence, and in two of the world's most iconic wine-growing regions. And then, in 2005, the sisters found themselves together in California. And fueled by this shared passion for all things wine and winemaking and a desire to shake up the industry, they launched the McBride Sisters Collection. It's fierce, it's female, it's forward-thinking in an industry historically defined by tradition and gender. Since that moment, the McBride Sisters' mission has been clear: to transform the industry, to lead by example, and to cultivate community, one delicious glass of wine at a time. This conversation will lift your heart. It will give you all the chills, and it will make you believe in destiny and in synchronicity. I am so honored to kick off season 2 of Lifted with the McBride sisters. Hello, McBride sisters. Welcome to the Lifted podcast.
Hi,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was a symphony of hello. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. I want to begin our conversation today by asking each of you a few questions. So I'm going to begin with you, Robin. Robin, where did you grow up?
Born in Los Angeles and grew up in Monterey, California.
Who were your preliminary culinary influences in your life?
Well, it was definitely my mom. I was raised by my mom, who was, a single mother, and we ate at home every day and every night. She's from Indiana, so it's kind of like country fare a little bit, but really fresh and wholesome and healthy food, and that stayed with me today.
And what were your early wine experiences?
Early wine experiences was probably jug wine that my mom had in the house. It was what I grew up with until I became, a wine drinker myself, but very heavily influenced by growing up in a wine region in Monterey, which was, makes world-class wine. So as I got a little bit older and I started experimenting from outside of the cooking wine that was in the house, it was neighbors' wines, vineyards that were close to me, things that were on, family dinner tables from winemaking families that I grew up with.
Andréa, where did you grow up?
I was born in Los Angeles and was there until I was 6 years old. And then I would say I grew up in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
And who were your preliminary culinary influences in your life?
I would say at an early age, my nana in New Zealand, definitely, and a little bit similar to Robin, like a lot of home cooking, vegetable gardens, in New Zealand, people do a lot of fishing, hunting, and we're really influenced by England. We're part of the Commonwealth. So a lot of roast everything, traditional roasts.
And what were your early wine experiences?
My early wine experiences were directly related to the growing of wine grapes. So the farming of wine grapes, my family in New Zealand is an agriculture and ag family. So that from a growing perspective, and then from a wine perspective, it was everything that was available in the house, from boxed wine to, some of the beautiful wines that were made in and around the area. And, we're pretty relaxed about drinking age in New Zealand. So I would say, consuming and tasting at a young age.
So one sister grew up in California, another sister grew up in New Zealand. Who wants to kick this story off? Because I know you tell it often. I've heard it, but I want to bring it fresh to our listeners.
Well, Robin's the first sister, so
I'm the first sister, so I
I get
get to start at the beginning. So Andrea and I, yes, of course, sisters, raised in two different countries. And we didn't know about each other's existence until I was 25 and Andrea was 16. Both born in Los Angeles to a shared father. My mom and our dad split when I was a toddler. And when they divorced, I was not almost 2 years old, I think, when they divorced. And my mom made the decision that she was going to raise me not in Los Angeles. And she headed up north in California and stopped in Monterey overnight and decided that was the place that she was going to raise her daughter. And once we landed there, we didn't have communication with my dad. Years later, he remarried and had a little sister, or I had a little sister, born back in Los Angeles 9 years later. And because I didn't have a relationship with him, I just didn't know. Andrea's mom, who was originally from New Zealand, and our father ultimately split as well. She learned that she had a terminal diagnosis, and she made the decision to go back to her home country of New Zealand, where her family was, when Andrea was about 6 years old. And unfortunately, her mom passed away shortly after they moved back to New Zealand. And so Andrea was also disconnected from our father. She didn't know that she also had a sister back in California somewhere. And so it wasn't until several years after that, our father himself was sick and learned that he probably wasn't going to survive his illness. And even if he didn't live long enough to see it, he wanted to make sure that we learned about each other and had the chance to meet, which we did. Our dad's from a really small town in Alabama. So our family there was like, your dad's passed away in the letter that I received, but you have a little sister. Her name is Andrea. She lives in New Zealand, and we're desperately trying to find you and connect the two of you. When I received that letter, Andrea was here in the United States visiting our dad's family. And so we were in the same country, but we were also one state away. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. Andrea was visiting our dad's family in Alabama. So from the time that I found out that I had a little sister, thinking if I was ever going to meet her, I was going to have to travel halfway around the world. But to find out she was just a few hours away from me. So learned about her, and we were able to briefly speak on the phone and then meet in person the very next day.
That share there's so many intersecting, serendipitous, fateful aspects, even of big dreams. I mean, just what it means to sort of end a relationship, but take the dream and the leap of like, okay, well, I'm going to take my daughter to Northern California. Or in Andrea's case, a mother who has the dream, she knows she's ill, and it's like, well, I need to bring my daughter back to New Zealand to be close to my side of the family. And your threads go in completely different directions, only to beautifully weave back together, as you say, a couple of states away. That when you finally realize and you're finally able to speak for the first moment. So I want to go to Andrea because I need to hear from you. That first phone call, you're in Alabama.
Yes.
And the phone is passed to you, or do you dial the phone call? Like, what happened?
So I'm in Camden, Alabama. Really, it's where our family's from. It's a really small town, sort of between Selma and Montgomery. And the only other time that I was in Alabama prior to that was for our dad's funeral a couple years earlier. And so, New Zealand is very different than the United States, let alone Alabama. So I'm sitting in my my aunt's living room, and the phone rings, and I watch her go over and pick up the phone, and then she's just like elated, screaming. I couldn't tell if it was excitement. There was all these things where I didn't know if it was good or bad, honestly. And then I just remember her saying to me, Andrea, it's your sister on the phone. Talk to your sister. Oh gosh, still makes me so emotional. And I just, you know, you need a kind of a beat to process that. Because, you know, whilst I knew about Robin, I had dealt with, you know, losing my mom, losing our dad. I was living in foster care between my foster family and my uncle. So for me, this idea of there's this person out in the world, I'd gone through kind of so much trauma that I was just like, I didn't want to excite myself or sort of believe in it. It was just something that was there. So just to kind of take a beat to, wow, like this is kind of her. And then immediately I'm just so excited. So I'm just like, where are you? You know, but you know, and I just remember her voice on the phone. She's just saying, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And I'm thinking to myself, she doesn't really talk that much. That's okay though. We can, you know, maybe I'll be like the chatty one. And we always laugh about it because, you know, at the time I, you know, don't have that much of an accent anymore, but my accent was really, really strong. So Robin had no idea what I was saying. So she was just kind of like, you know. And it just happened that the next day I was flying up to New York. We have family, our dad's family in Harlem and in Dykeman. And Robin was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna jump on a plane, like, you know, we'll meet in the airport. And that's how it happened.
I am taking all of this in, and I'm taking a breath because I'm getting emotional with you guys, just hearing the hairpin emotional turns within your story. To imagine what this experience must have been like for you growing up separately, Robin, you know, in the Bay Area with your mom, Andréa in New Zealand, first with your mom, then with your uncle, then with your foster family, having no knowledge of each other's existences, right? And after your shared father learned of his terminal illness, for him and then his family to make it their mission to find you both and to connect you, that is just incredible. That is a pivotal moment. And the fact that they were able to find you both, first Andréa and then Robin, in completely different, separate parts of the planet, that is like an epic feat. And the serendipity that you spoke of, Robin, of receiving this letter, right? A letter letting you know of your sister's existence at the moment that you happen to be in Atlanta, and Andréa happened to be visiting her the family in Alabama, just one state away. It's fateful. And then you call, right? You call to follow up on this letter that you received, and you find that your sister is on the other side of the phone, and within an instant your lives just change. And you're hearing your sister, and you're processing the fact that she exists, and processing the fact that she's a state away, and then you two hatch a plan to meet the very next day. Wow. Just wow. And now you're in New York, and now you're in an airport.
Yeah, we're in LaGuardia Airport.
LaGuardia, okay, the most just such a poetic and gorgeous place to meet. But you know, here you guys meet, and as a, you know, I'm very close to my sister. I've written about that relationship. It's you know, part of it is memorialized on screen, you know, in From Scratch, but we're super close, and we work together, right? And we grew up together, like literally same house, roof, all of the things under the same roof. But to forge a sisterhood, not just, hey, we're sisters. And there are a lot of people in the world, they're like, okay, we're sisters. We have the same dad. We're sisters. Good. We'll send each other a holiday card. We're fine. You know, it was lovely meeting you, but I'm good. Instead, you guys are taking these big leaps. You meet in LaGuardia, and something happens that says, we can't not know each other. We can't not be in each other's lives. We must go forward. What was that? What was that? What did that happen in LaGuardia? Did it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you have to look back at sort of the circumstances, like independently, that each of us grew up in and went through. And Andréa with the loss of her mother, ultimately the loss of our father, which for me, I never had a relationship with him. So there was a void already. And then there was this sort of permanent transition to understanding that I won't have a relationship with him, but also the fact that each of us were only children. So there's a lot of, for each of us, there's a lot of missing pieces of our lives and a lot of missing connections. And so, you know, I think a lot of only children are kind of like always want a sibling anyway. So it's like we had so many voids, missing pieces, parts of our stories that didn't feel complete, that as soon as we found out about each other and as soon as we connected, it felt like so much of what was missing became complete for the two of us. So I think it's more than just finding out about a relative simply, you know, or even people who grew up with siblings in a household. We longed, I think, so much to feel like we had our family relationships, that we were completing something that was missing. So it was very, very much a life-changing event for us to meet, and I'll speak for myself, it felt like it almost changed my identity. I went from being an only child who had no connections to my father's side of the family to suddenly having this sister who very much looked like me. We bonded. There's obviously a lot of DNA at play from this man because we're similar in so many ways, to really, you know, starting the process of feeling like, you know, a complete person and now part of this, our new family unit. There was so much of our own personalities and our own ways and just who we are, even though we're raised on different ends of the planet, that instantly like came together, came to life, and we could recognize it in each other from like the very first second.
I want to fast forward just a little bit in time. And that is, so Andrea, you moved to California eventually for university, correct?
Correct.
And Robin, at this point, you've left Atlanta and you're back in California.
That's right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay. So, and you're in Northern California or
right. Back
the
in
Central
Monterey.
Coast.
Yep.
Okay. And so what you each decide to do in this ongoing getting to know each other as sisters is you decide to meet in and around, I think it was at Santa Barbara, and just meet in the middle. Anyone who knows the geography of California, they would meet up in and around the Santa Barbara area and often would have wine as you would in Santa Barbara at all these sort of wine tasting and get to know each other. Tell me more about this time.
Yeah, and I would say it was like Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, you know, and then times, obviously, I was so curious about where Robin grew up, so Monterey, and that time was so super special because it really was this period in which we were getting to know each other as women and building this relationship as sisters. And when we first met, you know, in LaGuardia, you know, kind of after all of the, you know, the feels, you know, and we got back to our family's apartment, and the sort of this natural progression was, what was it like where you grew up? You know, Robin, she's like, I kind of think I know where Aotearoa, where New Zealand is, you know, I don't know much about it. And the same thing for me in terms of Monterey. And really quickly, again, the serendipity of all of this was that we both grew up in these places that are on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, just one in the southern hemisphere, one in the northern hemisphere, in these agriculture areas, you know, in these world-class winemaking regions. And so there was that when we first met. And then it just happened. I chose that school to go to in Southern California. And then we're, you know, and then we're driving. And then again, we're in this backdrop of like ag and wine country. And honestly, sometimes we would just not even particularly go to like a lot of like tasting rooms. We would just drive, you know, and talk and, you know, just, there wasn't like a real pointedness like to it, if that makes any sense. But we did end up, you know, in just small little tasting rooms and stuff. And I think both of us, we just kind of, Robin touched on it, just the way that we think is very similar. And so, you know, we're going into these experiences and we're talking about the wine regions that we grew up, tasting these wines, and then it's sort of like, no, I don't want to say making improvements, but thinking about how we could help build to make the experience a little bit more, I would say, approachable, fun, you know, for a very sort of wide group of people, versus it seemed like there was like a narrow sort of, we could see this pattern of like who would show up in these places, this kind of format of how it was done. It felt like very intimidating. There was sort of like a lot of rules. And so that was kind of what was going on, was we were just really getting to know each other as sisters, as women, and then all the things that were going on in our lives in the time, you know, and kind of like being there with each other for that, with this backdrop of wine country.
So what I'm gleaning from this is that this is a time of personal exploration as you're getting to know each other. It's not quite formally yet professional exploration, because I don't think you guys anybody was thinking like, oh, we're going to one day be a winemaker. It's just, you're just exploring the area, but you're observing, you're paying attention, you're noticing what's happening. And given whatever was going on in each of your individual lives, there's this moment where you are leaning into the other, perhaps for advice, to sort of bounce ideas off of. How can you support each other? And when I hear all of that together, you know, and of course, we have the benefit of hindsight now, you can see the DNA of this company.
We always say like wine chose us. We didn't necessarily seek out to make this our profession. And it basically needed to like hit us in the head 20 times before we were like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe this is something that we should think about.
You know, often in wine making, there's an underlying narrative of family. Like, we're the Mondavi family. We're the, I don't know, cake breads. We're the whomever, right? We're the Rutherford family. Whomever the you know, family is a big thing. Privilege is sort of underlying in the wine stories and the narratives of wine. Usually it's like legacy growers. It's family-owned vineyards. You guys have none of that happening. Like, you were like, we're sisters who just got to know each other. We own no land in Southern California. We don't have a legacy name. We have a dad who, on his essentially in stages of life, his final wish was that his two girls meet up in the world. That's what you got. And yet you guys set forth and make an incredible industry changing company. And I get chills thinking about both the personal cost, right, to that, in terms of, I can only imagine the emotions along the way of building a company and a brand, putting your dads and your names on it. And then the professional chutzpah, you know, like that, to do this. So I want to talk about that aha moment when you guys first were like, we're making a wine and we're gonna do this. We see a gap here and we want to fill that gap. Where were you and who said it first?
I don't know if there's, it's a tough question. I think it was really environmental, I think, in terms of what was going on in our lives at the time. So it was, I'd come to the United States for university on an athletic scholarship, had a really terrible injury, and I knew that I wasn't going to progress in the way that I wanted to, because of that injury. Robin had been in corporate America. She had extended her family, just had twins, and we're kind of just, I think, in this moment of externally, environmentally, there was these things going on in our lives, and with the backdrop of like that stuff leading up to, we're kind of like, we went from, hey, you know, just joking around, you know, what if, you know, and maybe it could be like this, to, well, why don't we try it? Why don't we do it? And then to your point of like, well, we don't have any money. We don't come from a legacy wine family. Robin was in corporate America and had skills. I have no skills. I have a lot of energy to lend to this scenario. And so for us, it was like, okay, now let's take a look and kind of map out what would it take and what are the relationships, what are the resources, what do we have to, if this is a big idea to one day, make wine that's ours, what are the steps that we could take to get there? And so for us, the big thing first up was the money piece of it. So what we did was we took a look at the business of wine, and from the viewpoint of the United States, and we're like, okay, well, we could get a federal import license, become a wine importer. Robin, at the company that she was at, they manufactured scientific equipment, for universities and all types of things. And she was responsible for the import export of all of that. So we're like, okay, she knows how to do this, the skill set. She can move things around the world. And then growing up in Blenheim and Marlborough, my mom's family were farmers. And I knew families that were winemakers, and everybody wants to be in the US market. So we were like, let's go down there and convince them just to give us a little bit of wine, and then we can import it, and then we can sell it in California. And then sort of in that relationship, every time of year it's harvest, we'll come back down. They can teach us how to make wine. And then that will kind of be the first kind of chunky step to test out, can we do this or not?
I mean, clearly, yes. The answer was yes, clearly, because over the next several years, this plan proves itself to be incredibly successful. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit because you and Robin are building this company together from the ground up, right? You are sourcing and importing wines from vineyards in New Zealand. You're cold calling restaurants, wine buyers, wine directors from all over California. You are advocating for yourselves and creating a name in the industry. And then in 2010, you launch EcoLove, which is a brand that is focused on sustainable wines that you source from vineyards in New Zealand. And then in 2015, you start Trouvé, which is a brand that focuses on California's Central Coast wines. And by the spring of 2017, you are producing wines from your respective regions. You are producing them, right? Wines from New Zealand and from the Central Coast of California. And you put all of these wines together under one label, McBride Sisters Collection. And you're now this successful multinational wine company that is a beloved consumer brand. And then it gets even better because there's Essence Fest in 2018. And something happens that we will only call a Black girl magic moment.
Yeah.
What happened?
By that time, we have a multinational wine company, right? We have McBride Sisters Collection. We're growing in New Zealand. We're growing in the Central Coast of California. And I want to say 2016, 2017, there were just a lot of these little things that we were seeing within the community that were awesome. People becoming judges, on the athletic side, entertainment side, and academia. And having reached that milestone already with the wine company, and knowing, just relating kind of back to Camden, Alabama, our dad was the youngest of 12 sharecroppers picking cotton. Our family was in ag there as well. It was just kind of this culmination of this idea that we wanted to pay homage and create something that was really focused on the women in our family, and then the women in our community, because we recognized the weight of 300 years prior, that a lot of what we were doing, was because of the efforts of the people that came before us. And so taking it to Essence Festival, it was the first time that New Orleans had a Black woman who was a mayor. Obviously, Essence Festival, I think it's largest conference in North America. You probably have 99% of the women there are Black women. And we just wanted to be able to kind of commemorate and capture something where we could say, this is specifically for you. We see you, we want to celebrate you, the small things, medium things, everything in between. But this is really, really important. And so we created the Black Girl Magic label. It was just one SKU. And just the thought sort of going into that for that wine is that we wanted the wine to be really representative of who we were making it for. And so our idea for it was we made a Riesling. Riesling's considered like the original noble or royal grape. So we're like, this makes sense. When we think about our lineage, and we want it to, like, Riesling's this type of grape, it gives you so much. It's aromatically, it's just stunning, in terms of like taste profile. And it's, in different parts of the world, and in France and the Alsace and in Germany. It's one of mine and Robin's favorite wines. And it was probably the first time we underestimated, in terms of our projections of potentially how successful something could be. We took it to the mayor's opening party at Essence Festival, and we've never seen people react to a label, a bottle, drinking. It was just mind-blowing. And Robin looks at me and she says, we need to make more than one SKU. She's like, we need to turn this into a full range. We need to plan this out. We need to get our growers in line, and we need to make this a thing.
First of all, I love that story so much. And I want to just really put a fine point on this for our listeners, which is that you both had the vision to create a wine and a family label with wine from two hemispheres, right? That would be brought to market and really and speak to an overlooked and often underrepresented market. And that is the Black consumer. It's, in this case, Black girl magic, Black female consumer, but it's also like democratizing wine. It is like saying wine isn't just for a French pairing, when you're in a fancy, which, by the way, it can be that, and that's lovely and it's great, but like to sort of like, and this word is used often now, to sort of decolonize, if you will, wine, like decentralize Europe. And then, and that in and of itself is a big deal, but then to also have the foresight and the interest and desire to really super serve an underrepresented market is just phenomenal. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So I can see why 2018 and beyond, people are like, I'm here for it. I'm here for every corner, every bit, every sip, every drop of what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think there's, unfortunately, in wine, it really, for a long time, it seems like in the United States, it was marketed to a certain class of people, a certain age range of people, and definitely ethnically, and so we see like the blue ocean of, those new to wine, younger generations, and then also to, different people, depending on your culture and your background, and like, what does that mean in the context of the food you love and eat and things you want to explore? So
I love that. I love that. And I love how you also mentioned younger generations. I think that feels like the perfect transition to introduce our final guest. Listeners, we have a bit of a surprise for you. The McBride sisters have a new partner who has been patiently, thank you, waiting in the wings to be the final guest on this very special two-part episode. Jess Drury is the founder of Winey Baby, a new wine company with a mission to cultivate community and connection through delicious wine. In June of 2023, the McBride sisters announced that they would be partnering with Jess to produce and distribute Winey Baby nationwide. So join us for part 2 to learn how Jess got connected with the McBride sisters, how their relationship is a gold standard for female partnerships in the beverage industry and beyond, and what creating impact means to them. Lifted is developed, written, and produced by me and my one-woman producing team, Celia Cates. It is edited by Jamie Moss. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for our next inspiring episode.